Well, when you watch Donald Trump and Sean Hannity together, as they were tonight in Iowa, just in this last hour, you are seeing two men who each think he is smarter than the other. And one of them is right. Sean Hannity proved exactly that in his texts to Donald Trump's last White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and Congressman Jim Jordan that were revealed by the January 6th committee. When Sean Hannity desperately texted Mark Meadows, telling him that Donald Trump should, quote, ask people to peacefully leave the Capitol on January 6th. Leading up to January 6th, Sean Hannity knew that lawyers in the White House and in the Justice Department were threatening to quit. On New Year's Eve, Sean Hannity texted Mark Meadows saying, we can't lose the entire White House counsel's office. I do not see January 6th happening the way he is being told. After the 6th, he should announce he will lead the nationwide effort to reform voting integrity. Go to Florida and watch Joe mess up daily. Stay engaged. When he speaks, people will listen. The Dominion Voting System's successful lawsuit against Fox revealed texts by Sean Hannity proving that Sean Hannity knew that Donald Trump was lying about the presidential election being stolen and that Trump supporting guests invited to spread those lies on Fox were lying every time they appeared on Fox. Sean Hannity did not ask Donald Trump about any of those things tonight in Iowa, where Donald Trump will face at least 6 Republican challengers for the Republican presidential nomination, including Mike Pence. Our first guest tonight says, quote, they are the in case of emergency break glass cohort. If Trump winds up on the path to prison and Republicans must scrounge for a last-minute replacement, they're hoping that voters see them as solid substitutes. Every Republican running for president not named Trump is actually running on the hope that Donald Trump will be indicted repeatedly this year in at least 2 different cases being pursued by Justice Department Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and in the election fraud case that has already been investigated by a special grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia. The other Republican candidates are all, as Charles Blow puts it, waiting for legal lightning to strike for Trump to become politically incapacitated, but Trump will fight to the last breath, maybe not because he wants to be president again, but because he wants to hedge against becoming a prisoner. All the Republican challengers are governed by ambition, but Trump is now governed by a more powerful force, panic. That panic was on full display tonight on that friendly stage in Iowa when Sean Hannity asked this question.
There's a special counsel that's appointed, and news broke yesterday that there might be a tape recording that, quote, where you acknowledge that you understood that these were classified documents. First of all, do you know who this call may be with? Do you know anything about it?
No, I don't know anything about it. All I know is this. Everything I did was right. We have the Presidential Records Act, which I abided by 100%.
And then Donald Trump went on for a full 5 minutes of completely irrelevant, rambling comment, lying about Joe Biden, changing the subject to Vladimir Putin, changing the subject to tariffs, and lying about tariffs, and never, ever came close to breathing a word in response to Sean Hannity's question about the audio tape that was revealed in news reports yesterday of Donald Trump talking about a classified document involving military issues with Iran at his golf club in New Jersey the year after he was president. Donald Trump expresses his terror and panic with those unfollowable flurries of words that run as far away from the subject he was asked as possible, as quickly as possible. At the end of Donald Trump's 5-minute panicked run away from Sean Hannity's perfectly reasonable question, Sean Hannity, of course, as if on orders from Trump, changed the subject, this time to abortion, never to return again to anything about the multiple criminal investigations and current criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. It has been 2 months since Donald Trump appeared on Fox with Sean Hannity. The last time Sean Hannity tried to be Donald Trump's TV criminal defense lawyer, but Sean Hannity discovered, as Trump's criminal defense lawyers have discovered, that it is impossible to be Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer.
I've known you for decades.
Question.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. Right. I would do that. There'd be
All right, let me move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff.
There's Donald Trump incriminating himself, and there's Sean Hannity saying, let me move on, which he did as soon as Donald Trump finished incriminating himself in that interview. Tonight, there was a very awkward moment for Sean Hannity and Donald Trump on the stage when Sean Hannity said this.
Does everyone agree with me that this guy's cognitively not there?
Of course, Sean Hannity was not talking about Donald Trump, but that was not at all clear to that silence audience who already had declared themselves to all be Trump supporters.